Hi everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. If you've had an encounter of your own and would like to speak with me whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. Before we bring on tonight's guest, I wanted to let you know I thought I had a Dogman Eyewitness lined up for tonight's show, but unfortunately that guest wasn't able to do it. Because of that, I contacted a Dogman researcher from Florida named Shawn Enfinger about coming on in their place. Luckily, he agreed at the last moment to do that and came on with really short notice, which I really thank him for. Let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and bring him on now. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Hey, Vic. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, and you?
I'm having a good time, man. I'm really excited about this show tonight and glad that I'm on it.
Well, it's great having you on. Thanks so much for being here. Shawn, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
I've worked in the field of archaeology for over a decade, and I've traveled to Central America and South America several times, Belize, Guatemala, Mexico, Peru, Colombia, Ecuador. I've done a lot of work in the Southeast, Alabama, Florida, and Georgia areas, and occasionally Mississippi and archaeology.
Wow, you've been around. Is your interest in cryptids something you've had all of your life, or did it develop recently?
No, I've had it for about 20 years. I've had an interest, but in the last 10, it's been like a snowball effect where I've kind of sought more information. I've had more of an interest in Bigfoot, Dogman, Jersey Devil, those kind of things, maybe Mothman. I mean, it's very fascinating, and it's a mystery that's so deep. It's going to take many more years to research it, and ongoing research, so I want to be part of that. I want to try to find clues.
It's funny how when you catch the cryptid bug, how it tends to snowball like that. How much time do you devote to researching cryptids now?
I watch as many Dogman videos as I can, and also Bigfoot, and also unknown animals. I do a lot of research on, someone thought they saw a strange bear or something like that, because that to me could be a Dogman. So I try to pay attention to cover stories too, because there seems to be cover stories, that get posted up for real incidents. So there's definitely people in high places that don't want the truth getting leaked out.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how that works, isn't it? You just mentioned the fact you're in the archaeology and anthropology fields, Shawn. Do you think cryptids have a connection to those fields?
Oh, definitely. I definitely would say that they need to open up and investigate, because of the folklore and myth, and a lot of cryptids are tied to mythologies around the world, and the mainstream may tend to sweep them into that category as just being make-believe and part of a myth, and the reality of them is continually being covered up by sweeping them into a mythology type category where they're just old stories, that people made up around campfires. But there's definitely legitimacy with a lot of cryptids out there, and too many convincing stories, too much evidence, too many people describing the exact same anatomical features, in different countries, different regions of the U.S. even, there's the similarities are just a red flag. People not just making stuff up. I mean, there are hoaxers and there are people that do, but what I'm saying is that the real stories probably hold a lot of weight, and I think the people that have the authority to prevent it from leaking out do their best to do so.
Well, like you, I do believe that in most cases where there's smoke, there's fire. With that in mind, talking about the legends you just mentioned, do you think the werewolf legends from Europe, do you think those have any basis in the fact maybe people were seeing dogmen back then?
Yeah, I would say, that's definitely a very strong possibility because of the fact that they're so similar looking in their features, with the way one describes a dogman to how werewolves have been portrayed in movies and illustrations and books. And I would say there must be a connection.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there is. While doing work related to archaeology and anthropology, have you stumbled across any evidence or information that might be related to cryptids like dogmen?
Well, yeah, I mean, in the pyramids in Central America and South America, you do see a lot of animal human type hybrid figures that are in the motifs, the sides of what's called stela. Some of the pyramids have different rooms that things have been carved and etched, kind of like stories. And they have, humans that are obviously humans you can see. And then you have these other figures that are like maybe a little larger, and they have like an animal head, sometimes a jaguar type head, or a canine type of creature. Some of them tend to look somewhat like a jackal type looking head, or a wolf jackal type animal. Not necessarily saying it's definitely werewolf all the way, but a similar type of look. So, and also with iguana type animals with human body type. So there's a lot of that in the archaeological history of Central America.
A lot of these legends I can understand, but the ones about werefoxes, that just seems so strange to me. I don't discount it, I'm just saying that it's kind of hard to understand what it's all about. Alright, Shawn, you've had a strange experience in the Ocala National Forest in Florida. Please tell us about it. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay, this was a couple years ago, a little over a couple years ago. I believe it was October of 2014. I went to Ocala for about 4.5, 5 days, and it was a survival training down there that I wanted to do just to learn the skills, because being an archaeologist, I get to go out in the forest a lot, so it helps, if you ever were to get in a situation and got lost or something. But that was a very life-changing experience because it was very shocking to me what happened. I believe it was the second night I was there. I went on a Monday, so it was the Tuesday, and it was around 10 p.m. Everybody's winding down, from, the hard day of doing the training and stuff, and, getting in our tents, and the fire was one fire that we all had about maybe 40 feet away or so. And we heard, I heard knocking, like tree knocks, earlier in the night, but also coyotes were out making noise as well. The scary part of it was that it was really remote. I was told about bears, and I was told about that they can come in the campground and things like that. And so it kind of bothered me, but I was not so concerned about something like a dogman at that time. And middle of the night, this was probably around maybe 1 o'clock, something pushed in on my tent on the left side, and it was a triangular type of snout, and it pushed in down toward my chest. And I would say the indentation was at least a foot long. Part of it that came in that I could actually see. And I only saw it for about, a second. It was a second, or maybe a second and a half or two. And it pulled back out. I had my knife right by my sleeping bag, and I had my hand on it because I had instantly reacted to it and grabbed my knife, and I was going to jab at the indentation, but it pulled back out. And I was kind of startled, but at the same time bewildered and wondering what was this? Was this a bear, trying to get in, or just sniffing around for food I may have had in the tent? And my heart was just racing. It was, blood pressure was going up, and I was really, really kind of a panic type of state, but I had to keep my, self together. So I didn't, make any much noise, and I, grabbed my little flashlight, and I was looking on the side of the tent where it pushed in, and I saw like a mucus drip. It's like an area about maybe a couple times as big as a silver dollar, or bigger than that maybe. And it was like you could see the regular condensation on the tent, then you could see an area where it was thicker, and it was like right where it pushed, whatever animal pushed in, the nasal mucus got on there. But looked out of the little screen at the front of the tent, and the fire had gone out, and it was a little bit of smoke from it, but there was no flame. And I shined the flashlight out there past that direction, which it was straight out of the entrance of the tent, and I saw coyotes, and there was probably 7 or 8 of them, turned in different directions, and that was very strange to me. I mean, that was a little bit unnerving. Some of them were in the shadows where I could only see maybe part of their head or just their tails, and the others I could see, like a side of their body. So, yeah, all of that was really bizarre to me, and I didn't sleep well that night, and the tree knocks on top of that, and I knew about tree knocks being associated with Bigfoot. I wasn't sure about it with Dogmen, but I've actually learned that it possibly could be, but that was very intense. It was disturbing thinking back about it. It's kind of like a nightmare scenario, because I'm wondering what animal was that big that pushed in like that. They would have coyotes with it. I don't think coyotes are going to hang around a bear. And the fact that I've researched that they travel together sometimes, dogmen and coyotes, looking back at that's even more scary to me. At the time I didn't know, but now I do, that maybe it was a dogman. And it makes me a little bit more cautious about setting up a tent in the national forest. I always think of the worst case scenario now, like what about if you went just 2 people, or just by yourself? Would it have ripped through the tent and eaten you, dragged you off into the forest and shared it with its family or whatever? But that's pretty much a nightmare type scenario for me to look back on and think about, because I've never had anything like that happen to me.
Oh, I bet you haven't. Was there anything about how that all went down that pointed to the fact that it might not have been a wild hog doing that?
It didn't press in straight across. It pressed in coming down. So whatever it was up higher. I was probably, the area where the snout pushed in was maybe about 18 inches to 2 feet off the ground. But it came at an angle, like an upward, angle. So it may have crouched down and pushed inward. It wasn't like a straight horizontal push on the tent. It was coming down to my chest. So the tent, it was kind of like a dome. Well, actually, it was more like a triangular type of tent, but the area where it pushed in was maybe 2 feet over me, but slightly to the side where I was laying, but it was coming down. So that would indicate it was, something leaning over the tent, which when I looked at it in the morning, I mean, there was grass all in that area because I wanted a soft area. So it wasn't in the, a sand or a dirty, an area with a lot of soil where tracks could be made. It was like grass and leaves. Yeah, so there was definitely no tracks that I could see. There was a disturbance where you could tell something had moved around in the area, but you couldn't see any defined tracks that were, of any type of animal.
Well, it's too bad there wasn't dirt there that would let you know what it was that night that did that. When all this was going on, did you ever notice any strange sounds or smells when that snout was pressing into your tent?
Well, it had a very fresh smell in the forest, but there was a smell that it did. Now, it wasn't like urine or uh, bad, like some of the descriptions, but there was an odor, and I don't know how to describe it other than kind of just a maybe an unclean smell that was around that didn't have the normal smell of the area that I was in. For that amount of time, I smelled something, but it was subtle. I think the odor may have been around, but I was asleep, earlier. So I would, if it had been around the tent for an amount of time, I may have not noticed it as much. But there was a different smell, and it had a little bit of a swampy smell, like a sulfur kind of it smelled different. I'm not sure exactly how to describe it, but it was definitely not the fresh air smell of earlier before I went to bed.
Researching dogmen the way you have been, I'm not sure if you knew this or not, but it's fairly common that eyewitnesses report a sulfury type smell whenever they have a dogman encounter.
I didn't know about the sulfur smell, but I knew about the urine or the wet dog type of unclean dog. But it reminded me of walking near the swamps doing archaeology, and a smell that reminded me of that. So, a slight sulfur smell.
Oh yeah, I know that smell all too well. Did you ever collect any of that mucus from the wall of your tent as evidence?
No, I didn't. I was too afraid to go out of the tent, actually. I was just kind of like clenching my knife and just kind of staying in my tent. I didn't sleep well. I kind of had to just rest. I would, with like one eye open kind of for the rest of the night. I was not going outside of that tent for anything.
Oh, I don't blame you, and I'll bet sleep was awfully hard to come by that night. Were you the only person in that group who believed in their existence?
Other people had mentioned about skunk ape, and they seemed to be open to the fact it's out there. Even one of the people that were from that area, not everybody was from the Ocala area, but one of the students that was there for the week actually knew people that saw skunk ape. So I think that they're open to a cryptid, but I don't know about dogmen. And the next day there was another tent that had been urinated on, and also like it was grass, but they still had, I guess, where something had walked around it, but you can't really see the defined footprints, but you can see the movement of the grass kind of being torn up a little bit, and like the dirt underneath the grass starting to be exposed. That type of I guess evidence was also there, but it was said that it was a bear that did it. There was some fecal matter that was also there, but one of the guys there said it wasn't a bear because they don't have fecal matter like that, because he was a zoologist or a biologist, and he said they didn't have that type of feces.
If it was a dogman that peed on that person's tent, hearing how bad their urine's supposed to smell, I guess that tent must have been a casualty and they probably had to throw the thing away.
Yeah, the guy that was staying in it said stunk. Horrible bad. It was terrible. That was definitely said. But he was at least a couple 100 feet away from me. So I was surprised that the coyotes were actually going to come up in that area with all of the tents around. They were pretty brave to venture up right in the middle of where we were. To me, that was like they had no fear.
Well, I'm sure those coyotes see people camping there all the time, so it doesn't surprise me they'd be that bold. You found a footprint in the Blackwater River State Park one time. Before you tell us about the print, please tell us about the park.
Well, it's in Northwest Florida, and it's a place where a lot of people go swimming and canoeing, tubing, and there's some areas around there where they can go camping. And it's not real big. It's just, it's a few hundred acres or a little larger than that. and there's some nature trails that go pretty deep in the forest, for a couple of miles or so. And many times you can go out there and you're the only one on the trail. They go along the riverside about maybe 25 yards away from the river for the most part. And the rest of the trail goes off and maybe a couple hundred yards away from the river. But a few months ago, I went out there with my two daughters. One's in high school, one's going to middle school. And we were going out there to just, see the trail and, nature, take some pictures and, get away for the day, have a little day trip. And the trail at that time needed trimming in some places. It was a little, tight. And it was kind of single file in certain areas. In other areas, it was wide enough to walk side by side. And the thing I noticed about it had rained the day before, or actually the night before. So the first part of the trail where people were going down the trail for a few hundred feet, and then they would cut off to the little exit to go to the swimming areas, was pretty much where the footprints ended. After that, it was me and my daughters making the footprints, other than random raccoons and coyote and occasional bobcat footprint that would go across the trail or walk on it for a short ways. We got into a swampy area that was maybe a half a mile past the last swimming exit, and it was an area that was very quiet. It got quiet there, and there was no sounds. And there was a smell there. That smell did smell bad. It smelled like a ferret cage at a pet store, like one that hasn't been cleaned out recently, where it was pretty potent. And I got a little unnerving feel in that area. And I wanted to, move on through there quick with my daughters. The trail was kind of canopied and dark in that area too, which was the end of the day. So it was probably around 4:30. So we were not even halfway done with the trail, and we kept walking about maybe an eighth of a mile and went to a higher ground that was probably maybe 6 to 8 feet above that area that was a more moist ground and slightly muddy, where we had the smell. And we got to an area that was sandy, but it was like the sand was kind of beaten down with the rain droplets, so it was a little bit firm on the top. It wasn't like a typical white beach sand where it was very, wavy and had depressions in it. If you stepped on it, it would leave indentation in it, but not as much as at the beach. It was a little firmer than that. And I noticed a footprint that was kind of going across the trail, and it looked very strange. It looked like a human-like footprint, but a lot bigger than my foot. I'm a size 11.5, 12 shoe, and this was at least several sizes, at least bigger than my foot size. And the footprint had claw-like marks in the ground for each toe. And the toes kind of angled off a little bit. It was a weird footprint. And instead of the toes look a little deformed, for like a human footprint. And they had the claws on the tips. And then the heel strike area was also deep. And it was a big footprint. And it was wide. So the shoe size of this would be something like a 15.5 to 16.5 shoe size, I would say. That's really big. There was also part of another footprint that was off the trail onto the area where there's pine straw, because this area also had pine trees, and about 2/3 of the pine trees are cut down, maybe for clearing or something. Maybe they're going to widen the trail or make other trails. I'm not sure. But there was still pine straw in that area, and part of the other footprint was the heel of it was off the trail, and it looked as if whatever it was cutting across the trail and not walking on the trail, because there was no more footprints on the trail the direction we were going, toward the exit of the trail. Just rain droplets, because, the rain droplets were like these little indentations where the rain impact was. There's just thousands of them, and there was no footprints other than this one and part of the second one cutting across the trail. So that was very revealing to me that this is something that's out in the woods, that's not using the trail, that lives out here and doesn't have the impact in the sand quite like a human. It had a very deep, heavy print, because when I put my foot in the sand and I just stepped at my 190-pound body weight, I didn't leave a dent in the ground, an impression that deep. That footprint went in, 2 inches deep in the sand, where the heel and the ball of the foot was. But yeah, it was very creepy. And right there, that's when I was like, there's something out here that's either like a Bigfoot or Dogman type of creature, but it's got claws on it. So I'm saying this is not what I've seen of Bigfoot. This is totally something different. And it looks like what you describe as a type 3 Dogman footprint.
Yeah, that must have been awfully creepy to see that. When you saw those prints, how did your daughters react?
They were amazed. We all looked at it and oohs and ahs, and they were just as amazed and shocked as I was to see such a footprint that was big and also not totally human looking. That part was disturbing right there. When you say that's not a human footprint, that's when it clicks in you. There's something out there that's definitely not a human, that is an animal type creature that's walking out in the state park area.
Yeah, that is a pretty disturbing thought. When you saw those prints, did your daughters put the heat on you to get out of the woods right away, or how did they respond that way?
Yeah, after that we were at a faster pace walking out of the park. We didn't hang around or go searching for more clues. That was enough. We took the photos and we got out of there.
Yeah, that was probably a good move. When you found that footprint, you were convinced a primate couldn't have left it. Why was that?
That's because of the claws. The claws are not like toenails, but they're like claws. When you look at it, I got down to the ground and only a foot away from it and looking with my own eyes. The impact of the footprint had this creature had claws that were like, I'm not sure, maybe like how a bear or a wolf or a dog's claws stay out all the time. It was like that. They're very triangular shaped and very pointy.
That had to be so creepy to see. If you ask locals around that area about strange creatures that lived there, what would they tell you?
I've actually talked to people from that area before, and I know several people that are acquainted with me, and they have seen what they think are Bigfoot type creatures, and there's been a few people see something that they said was like a Bigfoot, but there was something strange about it. Now, they don't really know about Dogman, but they said there was something strange about the way the Bigfoot looked. And so I think that you have both of them in that area, because there's been a lot of sightings over the last 15 years. People definitely seeing the Bigfoot, but also, recently I've heard people talk about a strange looking Bigfoot type creature, which is probably the type 3 Dogman.
Yeah, it sure sounds that way to me. Your cousin was deer hunting one morning and had more excitement than he was looking for. What happened to him?
Now, he's not the type that believes in a whole lot of supernatural, paranormal, or cryptid accounts, but he was hunting, and I believe this was back in deer season, and he was going to his deer stand, but it was maybe a few hundred yards away in the forest. And, you can't really run to it without maybe hitting your head on a branch or getting ripped up by thorns. So you have to kind of cautiously walk with a flashlight or a headlamp, which he had. And he heard 3 loud, startling screeches that were like a screech type scream. And he said it was huge, whatever it was doing it, because the vocal capacity of it was just resonating across the forest. And he said that he heard movement, that something was moving quickly, snapping branches and making footsteps, often, maybe a couple hundred feet away. His hair stood up on the back of his neck, he said, and he was scared to death, thinking about getting to his deer stand. And his gun was loaded. He didn't even think about trying to, shoot at whatever it was, because he was too scared. He wanted to get to his deer stand and get up in it. He got there, climbed up in it, and he still heard the movement in the forest, and he heard another scream or two. And he said he had never heard anything like that before. He had been deer hunting, most of his life, and it was the first time he's heard something so strange. He said whatever it was not from that area, or it's a new kind of creature. He didn't know how to describe it other than it was eerie, and it sent terror through his veins.
Oh, I'll bet it did. After having that experience, do you know if he's able to go back into the woods like he used to now?
He did say if he goes back, he's definitely not going to go by himself, because that time he was by himself. And he said that he's going to, probably not stay out so late and get it done, in an earlier time frame. But he said he's going to be a lot more cautious about it, because it kind of left him a little unnerved. And he did say he was finding hair, kind of some strange hair on trees when he was hunting, that he saw hair about 7 feet, 8 feet up on trees caught in the branches. And I told him, hey, you need to grab that stuff and bring it back next time you do that. That's evidence. We send it to a lab or something. He's definitely been shaken up about that.
You've talked with a lot of people from around the world about their views on dogmen. How do you say their views differ from the way most people in the United States view them?
Well, I think that around the world, there's always tends to be some kind of were canine creature, whether it's a jackal or wolf, coyote, a fox. These were canines are all in many cultures. And, Egypt has Anubis, the god of the underworld, god of death. So it's not that it's just here in the United States or just in Europe with werewolf stories. It has connections almost spanning across the globe like spiderweb. And even in Belize, they have a duende down there. And it's been described similar to a small werewolf type creature that's about 3 to 4 feet high, but with the standard wolf type footprint. So, yeah, the archaeological record does show with stela and glyphs that there are human animal hybrid bipedal creatures, and many of them are of a canine variety.
Even though you've spoken with so many eyewitnesses from all over the world about them, since you haven't actually seen a dogman, do you ever still call into question whether they actually really exist or not?
I would say, well, if you look at like panda bears and the platypus were thought to be just myth. And people didn't believe in them. They thought it was impossible, or that there's no way that there could be this beaver duck looking creature that lays eggs. And when one was found and they dissected it and they had it biologically in front of them, it was a fact. And the same goes with like the panda bears. They were like panda bears, and dragons were commonly just lumped into mythology, back in history. And when the panda bears were kind of rediscovered, They were no longer a cryptid. But they were cryptids at one time. And so was platypus. And I think the mountain gorilla and many other animals, but and giant squids. So I don't not believe in something because I don't see it. Because if those other animals were proven to exist and many people didn't believe in them because they didn't see it, but then they were found and they believe because the media says, yes, they're there. And when the textbooks come out and say, yeah, they're there, they're alive, they're real. So just because I haven't seen one, it gives me no right to say they don't exist.
I like how you look at that. Well, Shawn, it's about time for us to get out of here. Before we do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
I feel privileged being on the show. I've enjoyed talking about the Dogmen and the different cultures around the world and this mystery that needs to be continually investigated, and these creatures that are very elusive but yet apparently living in our forest, and not only this country but in many parts of the world, and or similar types of canine like hominid creatures. But open your mind, do research before you can totally close off this door. You have to do your own research and investigate and educate yourself, because there's plenty of evidence that other people have gotten, and there's many books, there's many websites, and Dogman Encounters is a great place to start because it's very thorough.
Well, thanks for the good word, Shawn. I appreciate it. And thanks, too, for coming on the show with such short notice.
No problem, man. And thank you, Vic, for having me.
Oh, it's been great having you here. Well, have a great night, okay?
Okay, you too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.